Let's start with some facts. Fact. Getting started is always the hardest part. Fact. Only if you're ordinary or dead. After he had been deceased for some time, one guy looked around and said, "I'm sick of death." And local conditions responded, "Consider the alternative." And with some chagrin, the guy was forced to accede. The ha-ha review. Anytime you forget that your own local conditions have a sense of humor, just remember that they still cause suicide prevention centers to be open. Everything that grows eats. Parades eat, planets eat, life eats. "Hey, hon," cried a man, "what's for dinner?" Today's psychological update. The idea of mask came to man after he first discovered mask. And a group of analysts tied to an unoccupied dog sled howled their objection to this comment. Moose number one turned to moose number two as they chewed and noted, if men did have a soul, then they could be religious. Chew, chew. And if they did have minds, then they could use counseling. Chew, chew. Scene 12, take 22. The local director called the city together and announced, the cast of characters we'll be using in today's shooting will be basically the same as yesterday's. And last month's. And last year's. And some people began shouting back, yeah, we get the picture. And now time for a myth. Lo, nay, double lo. The day came when was loosed upon the earth a raging horde of uncontrollable metaphors. We eat our own refuge, declared one man, and many nearby disagreed as they continued to pick through the garbage. If you would like to know whether the man was correct or not, look to those who never comment on the matter. All criticism is plagiarism. Life told local conditions. I put you in charge down there to see that nothing anomalous ever gets too out of control. And if you want to keep all of your perks, you better see to it. And conditions saluted, yes, sir. I always immediately sit on a mystic as soon as I spot one. And life seemed to grunt its approval as it turned and walked away. For you scholars tracking and recording these programs, I don't know whether this item should be filed under fairy tales, religious myths, or sorehead humor. Whenever the dumb begin to suspect again just how dumb they really are, they also begin to experience a subtle desire to attack. Competing intellectually is admission of defeat and proof of no creativity. No danger here. After becoming well educated, one man declared, "What the hell does anything mean?" And nearby stood his smiling, proud dad, who commented, "Time was when he'd only say that about specific things." As people began to become civilized, crime becomes serious business. And once they fully are, it can be a pastime. Only the simple of mind take such news and look outward for its significance. I, in fact, have already noted for you that people become sociologists because they're afraid to be psychologists, and that people become psychologists because they're afraid to become theologists, and that all of them become what they are for the simple reason that they're all afraid of becoming real individual people. In the upper level, mortal prison, men are held not by chains, but by habit, fear, and imitation. The warden told the guards, as long as men have unfocused awareness, we got nothing to worry about. A poet stood on a hill and recited, In a world that's filled with strife, you may ask what good is life, and life stepped in to say, you just try it. An elaboration of an item from our last show concerning how to tell if you are a mystic. One day you look around and suddenly think, I'll be damned. That's all. Nothing more. No. Just that. How to tell if you are ordinary. You're either satisfied or you're not satisfied, but you're satisfied with the reasons other people give for why you're not satisfied. One man called his pet rat, "You dumb pinhead mother." But the furry one demurred on the basis that the name was already taken in that household. A viewer writes, I bet you think that some of that stuff you're doing there is really funny. As a matter of fact, so do I. And that's what bothers me. Well, me in my mind, that is. So keep up the good work. Keep me on your mailing list, and don't forget to send me my $2 rebate for that brake fluid I bought. Sincerely, etc. Only the unawakened undertake charity. Hormones make us human. Hormones make us beasts. So what else is new? The belief that conditions cause crime would crumble and fall were it not for the continuing support and contributions of the simple of mind. A quick glimpse into the old future. At Earth's grand convention, everyone's state of awareness will be their name tag. Another excerpt from that secret handbook. A mystic's main job is to have fun. Instead of trying to expand his consciousness, one man decided to become an intellectual, explains he. It's sort of like being a weather forecaster in that I can tell you absolutely what happened yesterday. To try and keep things under control, local conditions told one group of rowdies that if they didn't calm down, it was going to start putting health food in their drugs. All of the world's religions and philosophical systems began as one man's original thinking. You can take it from there. A viewer writes, why do you keep insinuating that a man who knew the secret of life wouldn't tell anyone else? Insinuate hell? Viewer, are you deaf? Thus far in history, man has composed the unfinished symphony, has posed the unanswered question, and commenced the uncompleted journey. What's next? Neuro, fizzo, plop, plop, update. The mind is to the brain as the intestines are to the stomach. If you are an ordinary, everyday person, you may ignore this news. One guy looked at life and said, I may be a simple shit, but even I'm not that simple. And as is so often its wont, life just smiled and let the outburst pass. Biological update. Only one type of creature cares for others at its own expense. The stupid, the civilized, and the ordinary. I know it sounds like three, but they're all the same. The earth is hungry. Look it up in the dictionary. To be sane is to be fairly certain what will happen from one day to the next. To be of mystical bent is to hate the possibility. Har har. Of what? Asked a guy in the back. I started to tell you in advance that was one of the complex ones. But one guy told his son, if you can't be original, don't try and explain or excuse it away. I mean, after all, aren't cannibals the ultimate reformers? Now make yourself useful. Go shave a porcupine or study morality or something. One city earth dweller recently made this comment: down here, we're all fools. And those who quote others in support of their folly are institutional fools without necessarily the institutions. And several people in the profession standing nearby took exception. Life has few absolute, unconditional rules at the local level, but one of them is that no one who knows what's going on can be in charge. Oh, and life thanks you for your patience and understanding in this matter, and says that if you don't like it, you can go somewhere else. One guy's credo: if you look to others for inspiration, you'll never run out of things to look for. Anthropological update. Men invented mirrors once they got totally sick of blaming themselves. And if you're asked, shouldn't that actually be listed under electronic news? The way you can tell that a mystic cares is that he pretends to care. Romance, a brief essay. Toes attract toes, and fingers fingers, but who carries the allure for neurons? And Sir Gawain bemoaned, "Oh, where am I now that I need me?" One man used to make up touching, inspirational proverbs just so he could laugh at them. From the supplemental insert in our latest Joke and Novelties catalog comes this interesting item: the best way to be a mystic is to be from another world. It's on page S3, right next to the discontinued whoopee cushion. And a boy asked his mother, "Can the melancholy ever be mystics?" And she replied, "Yes, but they'll always be melancholy mystics." And if you're asked, "Why'd you have to add that?" Today's expose. Those whose comprehension of the meaning of life comes from books have been secretly joy-buzzed by life. Hi. Seems almost a dangerous amount of laughter seems to come. The whole idea of suddenly there's life, and it seems as too many of you have already had that feeling, and life goes, "Hi!" My gang and my crew just happened to be in the neighborhood, and we thought, "You have such a strikingly handsome house here." I guess that shows how many of you have actually purchased that plastic siding. Humor is a byproduct of the parade never being able to stop. One day, one guy got hold of the super horn and announced to the whole world, that the very next day he was going to plainly explain what life was all about. And immediately large bunches of people let it be known that they would not be showing up if what he had to say was not critical or negative. One day in a wood near a sparkling brook, a man sat down to rest on a slippery rock and rubbed his feet as he reflected, "If my thoughts are like Mr. Microphone, then the consciousness behind them is Ms. Static and Interference." One day in a body near a bubbling GI tract, a man's digestion chuckled and mused, "Yeah, and I'm Lee DeForest." And life and a mystic standing over by the main switch turned and silently smiled at one another. Not supposed to be my job. Lee DeForest is the father of radio. See, in deference, I started to take a cheap way out and say David Smirnoff, who later made the claim and had the big money and therefore got his name before the public more. And then I thought, well, you know, shit, what if I weaken and go down to the point instead of saying Lee DeForest and use David Smirnoff, and nobody reacts. You understand? So if nothing's going to happen, why not go for the big time? Getting off the subject in that manner, sort of. It would appear to be an opportune time, and if not opportune, it would appear to be a time. Yeah. That along the same lines to point out what an extremely breathtaking example of what civilization is about. It's like having a collection. Let's say it could be a dress or a record, a book. Let's say you got a CD of somebody that you heard about and you listened to a little and just kind of filed it away and forgot about it. And then maybe a few months later you read some magazines, music magazines, end report of the 10 best CDs of last year, and there's that one, like number 2. And you begin to redefine, or at least consider redefining, your rejection of it. Or a book you read. Maybe it's a big seller, somebody recommended you read it, and just, geez, and you forgot all about it until you hear that they're going to make a movie out of it, one of your favorite actors, or it shows up in a new anthology of the top 10 works of fiction for 1980s. For the whole 80s, and you go, well, I'll be damned, and you go pull it back out. See, I lied to you. It's not off the subject. If they're not going to go for David Smirnoff, why not go ahead and do Lee DeForest? Well, just like the Wright brothers, I can keep tinkering with it until it'll either fly or crash into one of you. At least drive you off the sand dunes. All right, ordinary people. There was one in there pointing out about habit and fear and what kept people in place and what kept... I'm going to stretch it out to a new meaning. But what keeps people in a sane state, in an ordinary state of consciousness, is that very thing that they will take other people's thinking as a substitute for thinking themselves. And this is not some sort of psychological attack. It's named a psychological observation. It has to do with the wiring system of humanity. Of course, first you've got to understand that life is alive, and it's not a cute phrase. If there's any one group of words that has any potential intrinsic significance, it would be that sentence, that life is alive, and that's it. After that, it really gets slippery and problematic insofar as words having any indigenous value. But life is alive, and then after you see that, humanity is alive. And not in the obvious sense, humanity is alive as a whole organism. And they're wired up in such a way that if you're ordinary, you're thinking what the collective is thinking. You're reacting to it in some way. You're dancing with them. And it is not psychological. As many times as I say it, you'll turn right around and forget it. It's not sociological. It's not political. It's not religious. There is a quite valid way, though it sounds as though it's a cheap metaphor. That's why I hesitate to do it. But here goes. There is a valid way that you can look at humanity as being one brain, one neural network. And at least you think, or at least you dismiss it as being too obviously a metaphor, or at least you think it is too simple a metaphor. You don't. That is, you don't realize it that way. Because you are dancing with the neural network. You are dancing with humanity's mentation or humanity's consciousness. That is, you are either going along with it or you're trying to reform it, you're opposing it. But people do not think independently. At any ordinary level, it is almost not possible. I say that in the sense of also pointing out that the whole idea of being more awake in the full sense of it, or being more conscious, is actually a shift in your own personal genetic makeup, which is almost not possible. So we're back to that. For those of you that like to be cheered on, I would submit, if you want to play some myths and rewriting of legends, I would submit to you this, that all the people who underwent this genetic shock personally, known as enlightenment and the awakening, etc., of Buddhas, of Jesus, of Moses and Abraham and Confucius and etc., I would suggest to you that right before the big moment, right before their own big bang, whereas they created something else internally, that almost simultaneously, but to put it in sequence, which words will have to fit a sequence, but just before that, they realized, I have never thought before. What I have been thinking has simply been part of the great neural network. I have never had an original thought. And the only way that is valid is if it does happen just a split second before you have the big one. Before you suddenly are blown away with the Buddhahood, where you suddenly realize, well, I'll be damned. By the way, I noticed no historians or children from the audience have come up and handed me flowers and buckets of bouquets, but last week and again tonight, or last time, I would humbly submit that I have given you a more workable and more interesting description of awakening, enlightenment. I put it the way that you can tell you're a mystic is one day you just suddenly look around and go, I'll be damned. See, not even a standing ovation. Just before that, just before they had the awakening, which I've already pointed out to you, is simply they began to think for themselves. That kind of description has never been used in any widespread mystical way because it sounds very what? Unmystical. It sounds very crude. It sounds like, well, that's something you go cure through education or just through sitting home and applying yourself. Reading different philosophies, reading different religions, and I'm sure by now, I know there are courses how to think better, how to be creative, how to be original. I was going to pause a minute, time for a couple of you to laugh. You don't like the kid from last time? I'm going to bring him up again. That he suddenly looked around at human institutions of all sorts and thought, wait a minute, if you could actually learn something at schools, of course he was insinuating learn something like learn something, but if you could actually learn something, then they wouldn't have to issue diplomas and degrees to prove it. People think, well, back to the moment I gave, I'm going to go take a course in how to be original, how to be more creative. Really, where they got it? Well, it's one of the professors that's on his spare time that's in the design department down here at Alabama Tech, you know, the city campus. Yeah, how much? Well, you know, such and such. And it meets just on Tuesdays. Well, I believe I'll go. Try it again. I'm going to go take a course in how to be more creative. Wow. I don't know why you're doing that. I mean, there's nothing curious about that. If you'll go to church and let somebody tell you better how to please the gods. And just so now you feel left out, and then for atheists and non-believers to go past churches and think, what a bunch of idiots. Which, if you remember, to really stretch it out, is the same thing as the difference between drunks and alcoholics is that drunks don't have to go to those goddamn meetings. The difference between atheists and the religious is that the atheists don't have to go to those goddamn meetings. Plus, I understand the Jews. I started to say are less, but I think they upped them. But at any rate. Think about that. I mean, it's one thing to pay to be a member of a church or to have your own pew or place to sit. But how about pay not to believe? That is, you want to go join the atheists. And they say, well, certainly. And they give you a card and a little pen saying, screw religion or I don't believe in nothing. But then you find out there's Jews that you got to pay not to believe in something. At least you think that's funny. Now, we could try and act almost rational and intelligent at the ordinary level and say, well, that's foolish. But it's not, because that's the same thing as issuing degrees. How are you going to prove that you're not religious? You mean stand around people talking about religion and how dumb it is for people to go to church and you stand at the bar and you say, yeah, I'm with you guys. I don't believe in anything. And you're a stranger there in their community. And they go, yeah, we've heard that before. A guy get in here and have a few drinks and be a minister's son. How do we know you say you don't believe in religion. You go, all right, I'll show you. And you reach in your billfold and you got an atheist card to prove that you don't believe in it. But wait a minute, this is getting interesting for those of us out of work. Maybe we can start a new organization. The Intelligent People's Society. Now, if you want to follow me with this, I was thinking, now, I'm talking about a lot better. I'm looking at it from a commercial view, as always. Make a buck. I'm not talking about this kind of Mensa stuff to where people give tests and all that. No. No, we don't want those kind of people around anyway. No, this, all you do is pay your dues, and we give you a card saying that you're a member of the Intelligentsia Society. That's it. Think about it. But then if by accident some of you actually are sitting there thinking, then you're left with this. Well, wait a minute. If you could actually think, how would you have to prove it? What the hell you think I've been talking about? And then someone said, oh, I knew that. See, they proved it. That's one of the favorite terms of some people, nobody in particular, but is, I knew that, which is, it's like showing your card. What the hell are you giving me advice for? You don't know what's going on in life. Well, I'm sorry, perhaps you didn't look right back here on the wall. I have a PhD in psychology. Oh, see? Who the hell are you to tell me what to do? Well, you didn't notice. Let me take off my raincoat. And he's the Pope or a minister. And you go, oh, well, all right. Or you make some comment and somebody says, that's the weirdest thing I ever heard. I mean, it almost makes sense, but nah, you're crazy. That can't be true. And you go, wait a minute. And you have one of our trusted cards saying, the Smart Person Society. And of course, they can look and say, well, is that one of those phonies? No, you can pull it out and show them. Maybe we'll have your photograph for a few extra bucks, and you can show them. Back to, not only is life alive, which gets awfully close to the thing, but not only is life alive, but humanity as a consciousness is alive. And not just in a metaphorical version of that life on this planet is alive. I'm talking about animal life. And it's not just that humans are part of that. It is that human consciousness constitutes its own level of life. And at the ordinary level, there is no escaping from it. You can talk about it forever. It's just a hobby. It's not all that serious. But ordinary people would want to argue with it and say, well, no, you don't, because look at if you're saying all of human consciousness, from the level of physical survival up, consciousness, that singular to man on this planet. Then ordinary people say, well, now, if that's what you're saying, we're not all tied together. It's not as common as you're putting it. We do not constitute one entity because, and then they would start enumerating. Because we're composed of Italians and Irish and blacks and whites and Catholics and Jews. And they would go on and on. Republicans, loyalists, Democrats, socialists. You're still part of the network. No way to prove it. Foolish to try to prove it. You can't even see it via any sort of proof. It's only, as I was suggesting, that right before the Buddhas and any good mystic has the big moment, is right before it, he realizes simultaneously, I have never thought before. I haven't. Not me independently. Because, for one thing, as I admitted, it is almost not possible. But notwithstanding all that, back to the invention or at least a technical advancement of radio. If you're going to talk to your mind, and you're going to try to pull out as an allegory to your mind, as I did at the final page, they went, hey, well, call me Lee DeForest. And you realize, well, if I pull something new in my mind like that, my mind's not going to know what I'm talking about. That being the case, well, I really should have done it the other way. David Sarnoff, not Smirnoff. Of course, I understand he did have one. Anyway, David Sarnoff, and you say, well, my mind's not going to know that. If I pull that as an allegory, you understand I had to go back and reform my own self. That you start off and you say, well, if I use that as an allegory to my mind, it's not going to understand it. And then you think, well, screw my mind. If it's not going to understand it, hey, go for the whole thing. You understand? And we'll play the state lottery. I know I won't win. And you look down, you got a 5 and a 10. That's all you got. And you're going to bet a 5. And your mind tells you, maybe even people saying it, says, you'll never win. You think you're right. Hell, $15, the 10, everything. There is useful validity to that. It's not an end, it's not a destination, but it is a kind of means. If it didn't distract you, I could pull out some of the honored mystical traditions and apparent methods and rituals throughout the years, and that's what they were doing without knowing it. Yeah. But that's exactly what they're doing was, well, wait a minute. If it's not going to work anyway, screw it. If X won't work, here we go. X cubed. This has turned into, no reason I'm going to continue. Some of you, I think, took a soft body punch with that one. It turns in then to, without them understanding it, into excessive attempts at unprofitable, in fact, sometimes dangerous, in a sense, physical overdoings. They try to explain it away after the fact of playing certain dangerous physical games, starving yourself, just to pick out an easy example. Trying to fast to the point of death can bring about sometimes what they like to call moments of enlightenment. Of course, what it does is, put your brain into such goddamn shock, it's almost like, I like the people nowadays, since it's popular, the near-death experience. And everybody says, well, I see, bright spots of light, and of course they come back from light to life. They all become religious. Well, I hadn't been to synagogue in years, and suddenly I realized my Jewishness for the first time in 40 years because of these bright lights. Now I'm a Christian again because of the bright lights, and it obviously represents God and Jesus. Well, there is another possibility. Have you ever tapped yourself with a hammer on the head? Have you ever stayed up long enough to where your eyes won't even focus? It's known, it's what they call that kind of, just commonly put, I think it's known as brain activity. Yes, but it was like white lights and I was dying. My blood pressure was about gone. I had no, they said that I'd been brain dead for like 30 seconds or a minute. And you mean under those kind of conditions you actually saw bursts of white light? Yes, and other strange things. Then you'd have to say, well, there's no doubt about it. You had a mystical experience. I mean, that had to be Jesus or Jehovah or Allah or somebody. Couldn't have anything to do with my brain kind of being out of whack. Oh, no, that's silly. The fact of going ahead and to use, since I'm the one that did it and started out with it, I'll stick with it, damn it. The idea of if you're going to pull an allegory, if you're going to try to do something new, trying to slip in some kind of information into your own consciousness, into your own ordinary thinking, and you were pondering what to use, and you thought, well, I'll slip in right here, I'll use the picturization of a David Sarnoff. And you think, well, Jesus, I mean, that's clever, I like it, and I understand what it means, but if I do that to my mind, I mean, I know my mind. I'll do that to my mind, it's going to go. I mean, I know my mind. So then, what I was pointing out is once you establish that, you say, well, that's a given, true. In that case, why don't I do even a better one, which is Lady Forest? Now, this is important specifically, as you know, but the story used to go that Sornoff just had more of the money and some political clout and more attorneys could hold out, but that he stole everything from Lady Forest. Poor old lady. So anyway, you think, well, my mind didn't get the first one, which I thought would be easier because more people has heard of David Sornoff than has Lady Forest, I thought. Let's assume I was correct. More people have. And you thought, yeah, but my mind won't get the connection. And you go, yeah, you're probably right. So what the hell? In that case, let's go for the best one. You understand? It's not going to get it anyway. But now, to give common people their due, which is about, I'll go back and play the common part. I'll have to play a common, ordinary, sane person in response to that and go, well, wait a minute, I heard that. You said that if a man was going to try to tell himself something, slip in some new information, and he was going to use a metaphor, a symbol, an allegory, and he was going to use the one about the invention of radio and having to do, if you remember what the one was by now, I doubt if anybody does, but it's right there. It had to do with radio transmissions in the brain and etc. And was getting pretty heavy into non-literal areas. And so I'm still talking with this guy now. And he says, yeah, I heard what you said. Now, you said that if you tried to slip in some new information to your mind and you were going to use the idea of the invention of commercial radio, over-the-air radio, and that you were going to really use the considered father of radio, Lady Forest. And you thought, well, Sarnoff, I use him because more people, that name is more common. He ended up being president, founder of NBC, and his name's been around. And you go, yeah, but my mind doesn't know Sarnoff. To tell you the truth, I know what you're talking about, but my mind doesn't know. I'm still this ordinary guy talking to me in response. My mind doesn't know Sarnoff. And what you said was that you realize that and you think, well, in that case, let's go ahead with Lady Forest. And an ordinary person goes, wait a minute. You know, if you're going to do anything sane, once you realize you got two possibilities. One's more obscure than the other. And you realize it's not going to get the more obvious one. And so you go, well, in that case, let's go for the more obscure one. An ordinary mind goes, you know, Jesus. I mean, you're giving a whole new definition to nuts. Or at least the potential tire damage of backing up. Because you should be going in that direction. If you got a possibility of one's obscure and one's really obscure, and you go, well, it's not even going to get the obscure one, so, hey, I'll go for the really obscure. You go in the opposite direction. What you should do is obviously abandon those two and go somewhere a little more common. That's why they're common. But now you understand, besides all that somewhat now theatrics, that is correct. That is the way the mind operates, which is exactly what I'm talking about. You cannot have an original thought, but an ordinary person will go, wait a minute, I am having something approaching original thought because I never thought about that before. That is not original. If anybody followed any of that, then consider what it takes to shock one, to shake one, to snap one into anything extraordinary. And we're back to the history is replete with, and many of you have tried doing something that you thought was going to, or is reported to be to induce or to help encourage some kind of extraordinary awakening, some kind of extraordinary state. And it's no laughing matter. It's just a silly matter, a useless matter, but people go and spend 20 or 30 years pursuing something, such as sitting in one position and staring at the floor. Or you can get up and spend the same 12 hours that they do doing that. You could get up and just as easily spin. So you could stand it. Or run 12 hours a day. Just jump up and down 12 hours a day, rather than sit in some position immobile 12 hours. People try to awaken through Epicureanism, through fasting, through staying on their head, through staying on their feet. They keep doing such as that and trying to push things to an extreme, which as always, it is not in some way isolated or discrete foolishness, because it is based upon, as if it had a choice, it is based upon the reality of what is possible. They're still in the parade. They're trying to do something extraordinary to speed up their place in the parade. And the only thing, it's everybody. starts there. Sure, well, the story is obvious there with Buddha and everybody else. What did Buddha do? He started out doing the physical. Of course, they were blaming it in a sense, or attributing to the fact that that's what everybody else was doing. He went to find a wise man, but it's true. That's the way the sequence goes in the parade, and it still does. But the Buddha, by many accounts, the most awakened man that ever lived. Let's just go with that. But why did he start out? He went out and whatever it was, spent 20 years torturing himself. But at the time he didn't consider it. He looked around, and all of those that passed for wise, all those that seemed to be involved with the struggle, with the adventure, were doing the same thing. And he went to them for advice. He joined them. They were doing it. They weren't just sadistic idiots telling him, well, go out and starve yourself. They were doing it. And so he joined up with them. Went on for what it was, 20 years, and he walked through forests, and he took off all of his clothes and went naked and lived out in the elements and deserted his family. And all of that is based upon, in a very crude fashion, an attempt to put a shock into the individual organism to such an extent that something extraordinary will result from it. And so after 20 years of doing that, 20 years, if I remember, more or less, one day he looks down, he's naked, he used to be a prince, he used to have a family. I hate to go into sad details, because some of us, we might even look anyway. But imagine how the man looked after 20 years and giving up a position of royalty. A good gig. Didn't have to work. And here he sits 20 years later. No haircut. No clothes. But now, he hadn't eaten. The story goes that he was about to die from starvation. So imagine how he looked. It's probably his skin was not at all clean. Probably had a whole bunch of Well, imagine. There he sat, and it suddenly struck him, which I'm submitting to you is what I've been talking about, was just that moment that he realized, what the hell am I doing? That is, he realized, no. He realized that 1 second I was trying to put in sequence before the awakening. Of course, now I'm playing with the historical sequence supposedly, but it doesn't matter because I made up Buddha anyway. You people thought he existed before. But just before that, he realized, I have never thought myself before. That was the whole thing of looking down and saying, what am I doing? Which was, he didn't do that verbally. He did not tell anyone else that, I assure you. He just realized, I have never thought before. Now, there's several ways I can put that. He realized how you laughed the first time, 30 seconds ago, when I said, there he sits after all these years. His whole life, look what he gave up. Some of you people, it's like, well, boy, I'd go follow a good guru or a mystical meeting somewhere, and I'll be there Friday if it doesn't rain or if there's not something good on TV. He gave up his whole life. Constantly, we'll take the story, and there he sits, on the first time you laughed, and I said, and he looks down, starved, naked, no friends, no clothes, about to die, and he goes, what in the hell am I doing? What that represented was he looked down and realized, I have never thought before. Me personally. He didn't blame anybody else, because that's when I did the elaboration tonight of how you know you're a mystic, is one day you look around and you go, I'll be damned. That's all. That's all you think. Nothing else. You don't go, I'll be damned, comma, and then go into, look how everything, There is no follow-up. It's, I'll be damned. That's awakening. That's the Buddhahood. That's enlightenment, is, I'll be damned. But then once it gets public, once it gets out of his mouth, once he dies, whoever it is, he or she, then everybody goes, yes, yes, yes. And then his followers come along. The people who do need to make a living from him, they come along and go, well, what he meant was, he went, I'll be damned. And then in private, here's what he told us. He went, I'll be damned. Can you believe that people have tried to be Hindus all these years? That's the way it works. And then it becomes a religion. I assure you, Moses went up by himself somewhere, used his story, and he went up on the mountain, stayed up there. Anyway, he looked down suddenly, looked around and went, I'll be damned. And came down. Everybody knew, hey, something had happened the same way that Buddha's old buddies came and looked him up. According to the story, and they all went, hey, what's going on? They just knew, well, hey, you done, something happened. You got the secret. You found out. They all go, I'll be damned. I'm putting the words for them. That was all. It's afterwards it becomes a religion, because then afterwards it doesn't make any sense. If you tell, all right, the secret of life, or if I said, everybody from Confucius to Zoroaster, all of them, if I said the enlightenment was, they went, I'll be down. And I insist that's all. I got nothing else to tell you. I know that for a fact. I can in some way project back into their consciousness. And I'm going to tell you, every one of them in their own language went, I'll be damned. You go, yes? I'll be damned what? There's no what. It's I'll be damned. But then afterwards, for ordinary people to make any use out of it, to believe they do, it has to be I'll be damned on the basis of it precedes an attempt to reform what's going on. They take I'll be damned as a form of criticism. Well, I'll be damned. Like, I knew things weren't right. I knew I shouldn't have been trying to live this Hindu life or this Jewish life or trying to be decent. I'll be damned. I should have known. It's I'll be damned. That's all. So if you're dealing back with your ordinary mind, you lost your place, I got to go back and play the ordinary guy again that heard all this. And he said, well, if you're going to try and do something extraordinary with your own mind, which remember it's the mind, not the body. But I was pointing out that that is always the crude attempts to do something to put a shock. The real shock is you've got to get something in up here. Shock's down here, nothing. It can be a hobby, it can be useful, and it's sort of a background. And you might notice that the stories are, if you want it this way, oh, all right. All of the great, well-known mystics, the Jesuses and the Buddhas and the Moseses, Muhammad, if you don't know what you ever thought about, but all of their common stories is before the big moment. Whether, I don't mean just literally an hour before, but there was always this period of going up on a mountain, going out in the wilderness, going into a cave by himself. It's all these guys going out in the woods for 20 years. But it's the, Muhammad goes in the cave all alone, doesn't know why. Moses goes up on a mountaintop. Of course, since then, they add all kinds of stories that God told him to come up here, that he was up there and he didn't want anybody to see him. Or that Buddha wandered around for 20 years looking for the secret in the woods. But it's always that they go off alone. What you're attempting to do with the mind is you're going off somewhere alone. But then people take all this physically, that's all they know how to do, and they attempt to put a shock somewhere in the body to put a shock into them, they think. Whether they analyze it this way or not. The only shock that counts is up here. What I was going to say was like going out alone is kind of, you can call it an interesting background, or it can be conducive to background. Conducive background to trying to put the shock into the nervous system up here. And so in the same way as what I was saying, if I got you lost again, fat chance. Is that when I'm saying it's the common people, that's a simple version of trying to do something physically by torturing your body, by going without food, by going naked, by just anyway, it's a very common thing. I'm sure all of you have been through some form. Drugs is the same thing, attempting to become more conscious through drugs. It's just that drugs is easier. You can stay at home, in an you can stay in an air-conditioned apartment rather than go out and wander in the woods of India naked with all the chiggers and everything biting on you. And of course, drugs can get up here and affect this, but that's still not the point. You're trying to do something physical, wherein physical will not do it. It will not bring it about. But all I was saying is it can be sort of a conducive background. I'm saying that for anybody who hears that and thinks, well, I've been fooling my diet or trying to meditate or do such and such for 10 years, and are you telling me I wasted it? No. It can be a conducive background. It can. But if you're finally going to have it, it has to happen here. And to try and explain, well, how can you do that? I've admitted, not only is it almost not possible to do it, it is really almost not possible to even describe how it is that you can hardly not do it. But one way to look at it is you are trying to introduce new current, new shocks, new information, new energy into the intellect. Screw all that. Into the brain. It's your intellect is the lips of the brain. That's what everybody thinks was my mind. Yeah, open your mouth. Here's some words. But your intellect doesn't wake up. Your mind does not become enlightened. Your brain lights up. I understand Bally's getting out of the pinball machine business anyway. Here's your chance. Take over. Boing. You have got to get You've got to get new balls in the pocket. You've got to get new flippers on it. You've got to get new current into the brain. That is what it is. So not only have I already admitted that it is almost not possible, now we're back to where we started. If it's not possible, if you're going to try and shoot new information to the brain and try to encourage it to do new exciting things, and you think, well, one of the ways I know what I'm trying to point to my mind right now, my brain, I'll use the thing about radio and how it got invented, and you know Lady Kelly and David Sarnoff, and you go, well, I better use Sarnoff. I mean, there's no sense just showing off. What's the point of just being obscure for the sake of being obscure, unless you're a rabbi? All right, an insurance salesman. All right, an attorney. And so you think, well, wait a minute. If I'm not going to understand it anyway, if I use Sarnoff, and that's not even the best available, hey, why not go ahead and shoot the whole thing and go for Lady Forest? I'm not going to get it anyway. That is the Buddhahood. But that's the step right before it. You can't slip up on it. Well, yeah, you can. So here we go. Well, sure you can. I've been working on it for years. But remember Buddha. Poor Buddha. I mean, the guy, he did it for like 20 years. And here you sit in clothes or at home watching on TV and think, no, you don't know. I've spent a lot of money buying books and taking courses, and I've had a handful of girlfriends that left me and just went, well, you're too weird with all that stuff. I mean, yeah, I'm sure that you paid a price. But now think about Buddha. Think about what he gave up, and there he sat and suddenly realized, I'll be damned. It's like shoot the whole works. I'll be damned. That is, I shouldn't analyze and interpret my own comments, such as being a mystic is suddenly looking around and thinking I'll be down, but since I'm the one who made it up, I can interpret on it. If you don't want to hear the interpretation, play like I didn't. I'm not going to do this. The I'll be damned also includes, does not exclude, nor does it necessarily include, but it includes that he looked down. That he looked down, right down, and thought, not only have I never had a thought before, but none of this is going to work. No. But then he realized, no, none of this has worked. Do you understand that you have... I tried slipping up for the last few weeks. I'd pull ones like, what sane man would ever get out to change his tire unless he believes he has a flat? And it met with such success, I pulled it out several times over a couple of week period. And I know it seems like a very crude metaphor, but those are the good ones because they're flat on one side just like the man's tire. Any sane person with just the slightest ability to hear non-literal speech would go, well, all right, nobody will get out to fix a flat unless they think they have a flat. Nobody gets to change a tire. An ordinary mind can say, well, all you're saying is nobody's going to go to seek psychiatric counseling, for instance, unless they think they got a mental problem. Or nobody's going to go seek out a physician unless they think that they're ill. I mean, you've got to have some reason to do something. There's got to be a cause. Inside the neural network that is human consciousness collectively, everything's a cause. That's what's sort of, from a mystical view, funny, or should be enlightening or informative to some of you, is that men continue after 5,000 or 6,000 years for somebody to suddenly turn and look at the neural network that is man and go, well, wait a minute, we keep trying to stop crime. We keep trying to stop spousal abuse. We keep trying to stop theft. But you know what? We just keep working on the damn symptoms. Well, which is? Well, people killing each other and stealing, yeah. We keep working on that, and we never get to the causes. And somebody will go, God, let me write that down. You don't have to write it down. There are caves in France that it's been written down more or less 6,000 to 7,000 years ago. Well, the point is that it should be informative is that everything is a symptom. I tried that one on you several years ago. Don't worry about working on symptoms because everything is a symptom. Now that you've had time to ferment that one and to get bubbly, everything is a cause. Or, those of you getting real good, in the neural network composed of at least 6 billion connections at any given time, any 3 billion, it doesn't matter what, you just look around and go, I'll be damned. 3 billion of them are causes, and the other 3 billion are effects. And by the time you go, what? And look back, these 3 being are now effects, and these 3 being are causes. And you go, wait a minute, and then, I don't have to get into mathematics and tire for all our tongues, but then it becomes like 1/2 of the 3 being that were causes are now effects, and 1/2, you understand? It just, there's nowhere to look. So an ordinary man saying, well, it's important what you put in your mind or to specifically work on this. I read books, I know where I'm headed. No, you don't. The organism, the parade knows where it's headed, but the parade got no voice. It's got individual voices. That's why it seems so unruly. It's half the people in the parade, you say, where are we headed? And half of them will say, well, I think we're going up here to the left. And you look around, and another 3 being went, I knew the liberals would take over. And they say, we didn't mean that figuratively, we meant that literally. And by then you look around, and the 3 being that were conservatives are now airplane mechanics. And you go, what does that have to do with anything? And they all go, and you think, well, it makes no sense. Now we're getting somewhere. Now, finally, we're getting somewhere. And I, along with Life, would like to thank you for your attention tonight. And as always, Life said, if you didn't give us your attention, you could go somewhere else. That's what Life said. Did I ever get around to the point? See, that was a trick question. To see how many people go, well, did it? See, if you wait for the point, you might as well be Buddha sitting there waiting. He sits there and realizes, oh, wait a minute. That suddenly all of his clothes, or at least gradually, they will all reappear, thread by thread. And his hair will kind of flatten out and get unmatted and get combed. His beard will go away and all of it. And then you go, so that was the point. Then it would have been Buddha, he would have been a Hindu. And he could say, well, I succeeded.